There comes a moment when the mask she has worn for years begins to crack, not because someone exposed her, but because she can no longer escape the truth within herself. The narcissistic woman lives in a carefully constructed illusion, built on admiration, control, and the constant need to feel superior. But illusions, no matter how convincing, are fragile. When true love walks away, when the person who once offered unconditional care withdraws their presence, something fundamental inside her shifts. The silence that follows becomes unbearable. It's no longer a weapon she can use to punish. It becomes a mirror reflecting her emptiness. In that stillness, she begins to sense what she destroyed. For the first time, she sees beyond her own ego and recognizes the humanity of the one she pushed away. It's not that she suddenly becomes self-aware in the enlightened sense, but the absence of control forces her to confront a new kind of reality, one where power doesn't exist and affection can't be demanded. This realization is both her torment and her teacher. She starts to feel a loss that her pride cannot rationalize. It's not about missing a person she can manipulate. It's about missing the feeling of being truly seen and accepted. That kind of connection, once lost, cannot be replaced by attention or flattery. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's precisely what happens here. She begins, however painfully, to see her own darkness, the pattern of destruction that has followed her through every relationship. The truth is simple yet devastating. You cannot love what you seek to control. And once that realization dawns, the echo of what she lost becomes louder than any praise she ever received. The truth about narcissism is that it thrives on performance. Every smile, every act of charm, every display of confidence is part of a rehearsed identity, a facade built to earn validation, not connection. When that validation disappears, the stage lights go out, and what remains behind the curtain is not strength, but emptiness. The narcissistic woman begins to feel this void when her source of admiration, the person who once loved her unconditionally, stops feeding the illusion. Without that external reflection of her superiority, her sense of self begins to crumble. What's left is a hollow echo of what she once pretended to be. The energy that once went into control and manipulation now turns inward as confusion and despair. She starts to ask, not consciously but emotionally, who am I without someone to admire me? That question is the beginning of a painful unraveling. For someone who has spent her life constructing a false self, confronting that emptiness feels like psychological death. Yet it's in this death of illusion that the possibility of awakening exists. From a Jungian perspective, this confrontation with emptiness is the meeting of the ego and the shadow, the moment when one must face the part of themselves they've denied. For her, that shadow is not weakness, but vulnerability, the capacity to love genuinely, which she suppressed in favor of control. The tragedy is that she sees it only after it's too late, after the one who once offered her that love has learned to walk away. In the end, the emptiness behind the mask becomes her greatest teacher. It shows that admiration is temporary, but authenticity is eternal. And if she ever wishes to be truly loved again, she must first have the courage to meet the person she's been hiding from, herself. The most profound shift in power occurs not when you confront a narcissist, but when you no longer feel the need to. The narcissistic woman depends on reaction. It's her lifeblood. Every argument, every emotional outburst, every attempt to explain yourself feeds her sense of control. As long as you're responding, she believes she still matters, that she still has influence over your emotional woe. But when you stop chasing, when you detach with calm and clarity, her entire system begins to collapse. What she cannot tolerate is indifference. Indifference is the language of liberation, and it terrifies her because it signals that her psychological grip has been broken. She will test it at first, trying to provoke a response, reminding you of old memories or alternating between affection and cruelty. It's not love. It's an attempt to regain control of the emotional narrative. But the moment you no longer react, you introduce her to a truth she's never faced. She no longer has power over you. From a Jungian point of view, this moment represents the individuation process, when you reclaim the parts of yourself you once projected onto another. In freeing yourself from her validation, you begin to see your own worth independent of her perception. The relationship becomes the mirror through which you rediscover your autonomy. To her, your silence feels like punishment. To you, it becomes peace. And in that peace, something remarkable happens. You begin to grow while she begins to unravel. What once seemed like weakness, walking away, letting go, reveals itself as strength. True power isn't in changing a narcissist, it's in refusing to let one define your reality. The day you stop reacting is the day you begin to heal. Authenticity is the one thing a narcissistic woman cannot replicate. She can mimic affection, perform empathy, and imitate passion, but what she cannot sustain is sincerity. True love requires vulnerability, a willingness to be seen without control. For her, that's unbearable. She has spent her life surviving through performance, crafting identities that keep her admired but never truly known. And yet, it's precisely that authenticity she once rejected that now haunts her when it's gone. When the person who loved her without conditions is no longer there, she begins to realize what she traded for validation. The admiration she chased feels hollow. It doesn't warm her in silence. It doesn't comfort her at night. The connection she lost was built on something deeper, truth. And truth, unlike flattery, cannot be recreated once it's betrayed. Psychologically, this marks the beginning of her confrontation with what Jung described as the false self. The persona that once protected her now becomes a prison. Every moment of manipulation, every mask she wore to appear powerful, stands as evidence of her emotional poverty. She begins to feel the cost of her deception, not in the form of punishment, but in the emptiness of being unseen even when surrounded by people. This is the paradox of narcissism. She spent her life trying to be admired, yet destroyed the only relationship where she was genuinely loved. In the quiet aftermath, she comes face to face with the reality that authenticity isn't weakness. It's the foundation of everything meaningful. And when she finally understands that, it's too late to go back. Because once love has been replaced by performance, no stage can ever feel like home again. Regret doesn't come to a narcissistic woman all at once. It creeps in slowly, disguised as irritation, boredom, or even anger. At first, she convinces herself that she never cared, that losing someone who loved her deeply was just another necessary sacrifice for her pride. But time has a way of eroding defenses. The very emotions she denied begin to surface in unfamiliar ways. She starts replaying conversations, revisiting moments she once dismissed, and questioning decisions she made with such cold certainty. What begins as denial slowly turns into reflection, and reflection turns into regret. This is not the kind of regret that leads to transformation. Not yet. It's the kind that gnaws from the inside, creating a dissonance between the image she projects and the truth she feels. She may still appear confident on the outside, but beneath the surface lies the uncomfortable awareness that something sacred slipped through. Her fingers. The love she once mocked now becomes the standard by which she measures every new connection, and none seem to reach it. From a psychological perspective, this phase represents a clash between her ego and her shadow. The ego wants to maintain superiority, but the shadow knows the truth. She lost someone who saw her completely and still chose to stay. That realization is unbearable because it exposes her as human, flawed, vulnerable, and capable of deep emotional pain. Eventually, the mask grows heavier than the truth. She begins to understand that manipulation may win attention, but it cannot earn love. And love, once lost through deceit, becomes the ghost that follows her everywhere, a constant reminder that what's real cannot be controlled. The harshest lesson she learns is this: power may impress others, but only humility keeps love alive. There comes a point when the story is no longer about her. It becomes about you. The chaos, the confusion, the endless cycles of blame and guilt eventually give way to clarity. What once felt like destruction begins to look like liberation. In walking away from the narcissistic woman, you don't just escape a person. You free yourself from a pattern that kept you trapped in emotional servitude. You begin to reclaim the parts of yourself you surrendered in the name of love, the peace you gave up to keep her calm, the self-respect you buried to avoid conflict, the empathy that was used against you. Healing, however, is not immediate. It requires courage to confront why you tolerated manipulation and to understand the unconscious need to fix what was never yours to heal. Jung often said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a part of the self, but by integrating it. Your experience with her becomes that integration. You learn the boundaries between compassion and self-betrayal, between love and illusion. And while she may spiral in regret, you rise with insight. You realize that her realization, her loss, is not your closure. Your closure comes from growth, from understanding that love without respect is just dependency in disguise. The greatest revenge is not bitterness. It's becoming everything she tried to diminish in you. Over time, you no longer need her apology, because your peace speaks louder than her remorse ever could. You emerge from the ruins of that relationship not as a victim, but as someone reborn, aware, grounded, and self-possessed. In the end, her greatest mistake becomes your greatest awakening. That is the quiet triumph of the healed soul, to no longer seek love where it was never truly offered,